I think in the longer term, that's probably the most important political issue, and how it works out will influence the history of mankind.
And what do you think the role both of the United States as the other preeminent power and also people like yourself in influencing and conditioning the outcome to that great wager?
Well, of course, how America acts is very important, and unfortunately, we are now in a very, very difficult global situation, because you actually have a collapse in global governance, and the absence of order leads to disorder. So we now have a period of global disorder, and that means that crises that used to be settled by some form of international intervention actually don't get settled. They fester and they accumulate. And as the numbers grow, each crisis could be settled perhaps on its own, but they are all interconnected. And the losers in one conflict tend to be the spoilers in the other conflicts. And therefore, the conflicts don't get settled. So you have them accumulating. If you go back, let's say the Israel-Palestinian conflict is probably one of the longest festering one, and they are not any closer to not any closer to solution. Then you have, Iraq, Syria, Iran. Now you have a potential solution with the partial solution with the Iranian nuclear issue, which could be the beginning of, let's say, Iran coming back into the global system. But there are very strong forces to want to prevent it, both here in the United States, and of course Russia is not eager for that to happen either.
Do you find yourself ever a little bit nostalgic for the kind of the almost satisfying order that the Cold War gave to the world?
Well, that was a certain kind of order, and it was.
At least you knew where to go.
No, it was easier because it was black and white. So I had a conceptual framework which I based on under the influence of Karl Popper, open and closed society, and it worked then. But then when the Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Soviet Empire, I learned that the collapse of a closed society doesn't necessarily lead to an open society. It can just lead to further collapse. And how far collapses can go seems to be quite unlimited. So I've seen countries that I'm very much involved. Let's say, take Haiti, where just incredible how things can go from bad to worse in terms of natural catastrophes compounding the political collapse. So there seems to be no end to how far disorder can go.
So if you were inclined to rename the Open Society Foundation to fit the more modern template, what would you call it?
Open Society Foundation.
Still.
Yeah. I think it's a good, yeah. Well, it's a little complicated concept, but I think it remains valid. Mm-hmm. It's based on critical thinking, and critical thinking led me to revise my simple concept of open and closed societies and make room for chaos. Exactly, failed states.
So I'm wondering, as you survey the globe and the various places where you've sort of wagered, what do you look at and say, that was good, that worked?
Any number, but what happens is it doesn't work that way, because when you have an aspiration, it's what I call a fantastic object. It's very attractive, and when it becomes reality, it's not quite as attractive as it was as an object of desire.
It's sort of like a beautiful woman who you've not yet gotten to know.
Well, I don't want to go in that direction,
but are you aware of your own kind of the limits of your own idealism as you plunge off to Sri Lanka or you go into? I mean, what are you thinking to yourself when you say, "Let's go"?
No, I know that my understanding is limited, is biased, is distorted. I know that. It puts me one step ahead of most people who actually believe that they know what's right and wrong. I have a sense of it, but in practice, I often make mistakes. I've got to have I have to make decisions, and so I have to rely on whatever I believe, knowing that it may not be absolutely right, and therefore I'm open to revise it. And that's what you need to do. In other words, and that's what I say. I used to think that I come close to achieving my objectives, but I never do. But I've discovered that actually very often I do achieve my objectives, but when it becomes reality, it doesn't resemble that fantastic object that led me to desire it.
It's sort of like writing a book. You never know where you're going to go until you get there.
That's right.
Yeah.
But some people have a plan, actually. They know what they want to say. In my case, the book I am writing, I don't know where it's leading.
I share that.
You have the same
sentiment. Yeah, and yeah. I think it's a more exciting kind of expedition. So as you look around the world today, what great projects? Oh, before I ask you that, I wanted to just have you just ruminate for a minute in between your life as an investor, as a financier, and as a civil society philanthropist. How do these two things stack up in the estimation of your own sort of life's experience?
Well, they have a philosophical foundation, a conceptual framework that I've worked out that had great doubts whether I would have liked to and I still would like to make a contribution to mankind's understanding of reality, but I doubted it. I considered myself as a failed philosopher. That changed in 2008 with the financial collapse, the crisis, because the conceptual framework helped me both to survive it as an investor, but also to try to at least explain it, even predict it, but the prediction was naturally incomplete because the timing I didn't get right. I thought it would happen much earlier, and it happened two years later.
Not bad.
Yeah, but you can lose a lot of money. Short.
Well, the difference between a philosopher and a financier.
So since then, I actually believe that this conceptual framework based on fallibility, reflexivity, and the human uncertainty principle actually may be a contribution to our understanding of reality, because our imperfect understanding plays a very important role in shaping the course of events. So you take something like the Euro crisis, where I've written books about it, and the role of imperfect understanding and distortions and misconceptions play a very important role in shaping the course of events.
It's sort of the Heisenberg principle applied to finance.
Yes, it's and there's even, I've recently discovered actually a similarity between the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and my human uncertainty principle. It has to do with the inherent uncertainty of our own identity. In other words, we think we know who we are, but we actually are not quite what we think we are. Mm-hmm. And our identity, our behavior can change depending on the role we play. And so sometimes we behave as particles, as freestanding individuals, making our decisions and thinking of our own best interests. And sometimes we get caught up in a wave. In subatomic elements, sometimes, according to Heisenberg, behave as can be observed as waves and sometimes as particles. And the same is true of human beings.
Well, now we are on the abyss of a
philosophy.
Of a vast canyon of discussion, which maybe we'll have to save for another day. Let's turn to you all for questions. Please be really brief and speak clearly, and maybe tell us very quickly who you are. And let's keep every question short because George only has a limited amount of time here. So who would like to lead off? Yeah, right here, Bill.
What is necessary to restore the European Union to the direction of its true vision?
It's a very good question, and I'm very much engaged